I spent my entire life staring into the darkest questions the universe dares to ask, not with fear, but with curiosity, because curiosity is the purest form of courage. And when you are trapped inside a failing body, yet your mind is free to roam the cosmos, you begin to understand that reality is far stranger, deeper, and more beautiful than any simple answer could ever explain. Black holes, for example, are not merely cosmic monsters that devour light and matter. They are nature's most honest confession that our understanding of space and time is incomplete, that the universe keeps secrets even from its most devoted students. And when I studied them, I did not see destruction alone. I saw information, paradox, and the whisper that time itself may not be the straight line we imagine it to be. People often ask me about time travel as if it were a fantasy, but to a physicist, time travel is a mathematical question, not a dream, because Einstein showed us that time bends, stretches, and slows, and if the universe allows time to curve, then it must allow paths that loop back on themselves, even if such paths are violently unstable, rare, or beyond human reach. And yet I have always said that the absence of tourists from the future is perhaps strongest evidence that time travel to the past is either impossible or extremely constrained, not by imagination, but by the laws that protect causality like a fragile spine holding reality upright. Now, when it comes to God, many assume that science seeks to erase him, but that assumption reveals more fear than understanding, because science does not destroy mystery, it refines it. And when I spoke about a universe that could create itself from nothing, I was not declaring war on belief. I was describing a framework in which laws exist so deeply that they require no external ignition, yet whether those laws themselves are. God, a reflection of God, or simply the language through which God chooses not to speak directly, is a philosophical question, not an equation, and one that science alone cannot imprison. I never believe that asking how the universe works diminishes its meaning, because meaning does not vanish when explained, it evolves, just as a rainbow does not lose its beauty when we understand refraction. And if God exists, I suspect he would be far more impressed by honest inquiry than blind certainty. Black holes taught me that information is never truly lost, even when it appears to vanish behind an event horizon. And that idea alone carries a haunting implication for existence itself, because if information is preserved, then the universe remembers. And if the universe remembers, then nothing we are is ever truly erased, only transformed, scattered, and coded into the fabric of space-time like a cosmic memory. People like to imagine God as a being who intervenes, who reaches down to correct equations or alter outcomes. But the more I studied the universe, the more I saw elegance in its restraint, a system so finely balanced that intervention would be unnecessary. And perhaps the greatest act of creation was not continuous interference, but the establishment of laws capable of unfolding complexity, consciousness, and even doubt on their own. I do not claim to know whether God listens, but I know the universe responds not to prayer, but to curiosity, to persistence, to the refusal to accept ignorance as destiny. And in that sense, the pursuit of knowledge is a sacred act, whether one calls it science or worship. Time may have a beginning, space may be finite yet unbounded, and the universe may eventually fade into darkness, but meaning is not measured in duration, it is measured in understanding. And my life, confined though it was, proved to me that the human mind can outrun any physical limitation, travel farther than any spacecraft, and challenge questions older than stars themselves, if there is a God. I do not imagine him offended by our questions about black holes or time travel, because a fragile belief that shatters under inquiry is not faith, it is fear, and the universe has shown me again and again that fear is the enemy of truth in the end. Whether the cosmos was created by divine will, spontaneous symmetry breaking, or laws we barely comprehend, the fact that it allows beings like us to ask such questions is itself extraordinary. And perhaps that is the real miracle, Not that the universe exists, but that it is understandable, at least in part, by minds made of stardust daring to look back at the darkness and say, I want to know. And if that curiosity leads us closer to God, farther from Him, or simply deeper into awe, then the journey itself is worthy, because the greatest sin against the universe is not disbelief, but indifference. And I have never been indifferent to the mystery that gave me life, time, and the courage to question everything. And yet, even after all these equations, debates, and cosmic metaphors, there remains a silence at the heart of the universe that no formula can fully translate. A silence that invites humility. Because the deeper I went into cosmology, the more I realized that certainty is a luxury nature does not grant easily. And this is where science and belief often misunderstand each other, mistaking humility for weakness, when in truth it is the strongest position a thinking mind can hold. The universe does not owe us clarity, yet it offers clues. Scattered like constellations across mathematics and observation, and each discovery feels less like conquest and more like permission to glimpse a deeper order. When we speak of the beginning of time, so-called Big Bang, we are not describing an explosion in space, but the birth of space itself, a moment where our laws break down and our language fails, and in that failure lies something profoundly human, because we too are born into uncertainty, unable to remember our own beginnings, yet shaped by them forever. People often want the universe to have intentions, to ask whether it was made for us, but I have come to believe that the more meaningful question is whether we are capable of meaning within it, because significance is not assigned from above like a certificate. It is constructed from understanding, compassion, and curiosity, all of which arise naturally in a universe governed by consistent laws. Black holes once again serve as our greatest teachers here, because they force us to confront limits, not just of physics, but of arrogance, reminding us that nature is under no obligation to be intuitive, and that beauty often hides behind mathematics that feels cold until it suddenly reveals a deeper harmony. When I proposed that black holes are not entirely black, that they emit radiation and eventually evaporate, I was not attempting to diminish their mystery, but to show that even the darkest objects obey rules, and that rules once discovered do not eliminate wonder, they sharpen it. This idea carries a quiet philosophical weight, because if even black holes must eventually let go, then permanence itself is an illusion. And yet impermanence does not equal meaninglessness. It makes every moment infinitely more precious. Time travel, too, continues to haunt the public imagination, not because people want to change history, but because they want reassurance that mistakes are reversible. And science offers no such comfort, for while equations may allow exotic geometries where time loops back on itself, reality appears fiercely protective of its consistency, enforcing constraints that prevent paradox, as if the universe itself prefers coherence over convenience. This resistance to contradiction tells us something important, that freedom exists, but not without structure, and perhaps this mirrors moral reality as well, where choice matters precisely because consequences are real and irreversible. Now, when belief systems attempt to fill the gaps left by science, problems arise only when those gaps are treated as permanent residences rather than temporary shelters, because history has shown us that ignorance is not a sacred space. It is a frontier, and frontiers are meant to be explored, not worshipped. I have never argued that science replaces God, only that it replaces the need for God as an explanation for every unknown. And there is a profound difference between removing a crutch and denying the existence of the ground itself. If God exists beyond the universe, then he is not threatened by our understanding of cosmic inflation or quantum fluctuations, because a deity fragile enough to be undone by physics would be a remarkably small one. The universe, in my view, is not hostile to meaning. It is indifferent. And indifference is far more liberating than cruelty, because it allows meaning to arise organically rather than being imposed. And this may be the greatest freedom of all. Consciousness itself remains one of the deepest unsolved mysteries, not because it violates physics, but because it emerges from complexity in ways we are only beginning to grasp, and the fact that the universe can become aware of itself through minds like ours is astonishing. Regardless of whether one frames that emergence as divine intention or natural consequence, my illness taught me something science alone could not, that time is not only measured in seconds, but in moments of clarity, connection, and perseverance, and that a finite life can still engage with infinite questions, which may be the most human act imaginable. If there is an afterlife, science cannot confirm it, and if there is none, science cannot mourn it. But what science can say is that every atom in our bodies was forged in stars long dead, meaning we are already participants in a cycle far older and grander than any single lifetime. The fear that science leads to nihilism misunderstands both science and meaning, because understanding the universe's indifference does not strip life of value. It assigns value to what we choose to care about, and caring, unlike belief, is something we can practice daily. The future of humanity will depend not on whether we solve every mystery, but on whether we learn to coexist with mystery without surrendering to superstition or despair, and this balance, that curiosity and humility, skepticism and wonder, is where I believe wisdom truly lives. In the end, my legacy is not a theory or an equation, but a posture toward the unknown, one that refuses to bow to darkness yet respects its depth, one that seeks understanding without demanding certainty, and one that believes the universe is not a puzzle meant to be solved completely, but a conversation meant to be continued. And as long as humanity keeps asking, keeps exploring, and keeps refusing to be satisfied with shallow answers, then time, black holes, God, and the cosmos itself will remain not threats to meaning, but invitations to something larger than ourselves.